Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Spilling the Beans. Today I'm sitting down with my buddy Alex Stone, who owns Island Realty here on Isle of Palms in Charleston, South Carolina. It is probably the largest or best known rental management company, short-term rental management company in the barrier islands of Charleston. And so he is the owner and a great guy. We exercise together. We've been to a couple mastermind events together and just become really good friends over the past year or so. So I'm excited to sit down with him. I'm going to ask him all things about real estate, entrepreneurship, his journey there, what he sees in the marketplace, what it's like owning a seasonal business. He actually took this over from a family business, what that was like, what that journey was like. So we're going to dive into all of it in this episode. Let's go meet up with Alex. Alex Stone, what's up, buddy?
Good to be here.
Dude. All right, man. So I'm excited to sit down with you and talk a little bit about Island Realty and kind of how you got started in the real estate space, how you got started in the entrepreneurship space. I want to hear some of your backstory, and I've got some questions about Island Realty and kind of how you guys run your business. So I'm psyched to sit down with you. And by the way, Alex is like an absolute animal in the gym. We have the same trainer, and actually you guys know Gunner. And so we both train with Gunner on, Tuesdays and Thursdays?
When Tim shows up.
I've been gone for the summer, man. I've been traveling. And this guy's an absolute animal. So it's I see how you are in the gym, and I'm sure that correlates to real life and in business. So I'm excited to hear more about your entrepreneurial journey. So tell me about how it got started, man.
Absolutely. So Island Realty, primarily what we deal with is vacation rentals. So think weekly rentals out at the beach. Mm-hmm. I got into the business when I was probably 14 or younger. My dad had the company at that point in time and always instilled like a super hard work ethic in us. Mm-hmm. So I started at 14 in the linen room, literally working beside everybody, folding linens for the summer. I'd run over to units, strip them out, and bring all the stuff back. So that kind of was the beginning of...
What's the most disgusting thing you've ever seen?
I can't even say it. Can't even talk about it in real life. The things that people leave behind and the extras that we find in the units. Yeah.
Really?
Legal and illegal.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, you would not
That's
believe,
funny.
We find loaded weapons all the time, stuff like that. So
Really?
we have protocols we have to set up for that kind of stuff. It's pretty wild. As
Fuzzy
much
handcuffs
as you
a lot?
can, absolutely, and other apparatus. So as much as your mind can imagine. But, from the beginning, being in a family-owned company, I always had this chip on my shoulder that, hey, people have this perception of you that you're being given this. Mm-hmm. And I really took that to heart and still wear it to this day, on my shoulder. And so where I came from was a place of, I'm going to outperform, outdo, just beat everybody, mm-hmm. so that they see Alex for who he is, not necessarily for, what he's been given or the path that I'm on.
Did people give you a hard time on that, or did your dad kind of prepare you for that? Like, here's what you can expect? Because my kids are going to fall into that same exact spot, right? Like, how do I prepare them? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who is owns a business, maybe they're first generation, they're raising kids, and they want to make sure, or you're raising your kids, right? And they're going to come into a business potentially, or sell it. You start another business, and whatever that looks like, they're going to be coming into some sort of money. And how do you prepare them for that?
So I think it started from a young age that we were always doing projects. My dad's always a hands-on guy. He's an interesting character. You'll get to meet him.
Right,
He's very interesting. And just, we always had manual labor. From cutting grass to, if the lawnmower didn't work, taking apart the carburetor, figuring out why it wasn't working, mm-hmm. so stuff like that. So I started all that, from the very beginning. And so by the time I got to 13, 14, it was just the next natural thing was like, hey, I need your help over here, mm-hmm. as much as it was, you have to do this. Mm-hmm. So it was just the natural flow of things.
Just keeping them kind of in the business. Did you always want to get into this business, or did you want to, like my dad had a security company, mm-hmm. and, relatively successful, especially for, suburban Cleveland, Ohio, and made more money on that than he did in his full-time job as a cop, right? And I went and would work or fill up some shifts on Christmas break and stuff when I was home for the holidays, and I was like, I do not want to be doing this, right? Because I was in the weeds of it, and I was like, I liked entrepreneurship, but I didn't want to be doing that business. Did you always want to pursue this, or
No, and as you can imagine, at 14 years old, like work and being an entrepreneur is the last thing on your mind. You know, you're thinking about girls and all the fun things and relationships and hanging out with your friends. So it took me a while to really appreciate the opportunities that I was blessed with and that work ethic that was instilled from family. You know, honestly, it was probably after college before it fully like settled in. That, oh geez, I have this opportunity. I'd always worked hard and grinded and done all the different things. Like every single summer, worked, donated plasma to go on spring break. Like my parents, you know, were
well, that's resourcefulness, right? That's
well, and that's and I
shows
think
you how to get shit done. I like that.
And that's kind of my MO is a tremendous capacity to get stuff done, regardless of whatever perceived limitations may be out there. And that, again, I think that kind of really clicked after college, but the foundation had been laid like as a young individual just from all the fun stuff that I had done. Worked over across the street at the what was the Isle of Palms Red and White at the grocery store. I worked in a restaurant. I worked in housekeeping. Worked at Tommy Stone's trailer repair shop doing manual labor, repairing boat trailers. Did a little bit of aluminum welding with Mark Guger. So had all kinds of opportunities for that kind of stuff. And being exposed to it, it was like, okay, you can do this and make decent money doing it, or you can do this and, you know, the sky's the limit kind of thing.
What'd you go to school for, college?
Just business. I actually started off in engineering in my sophomore year. Had a little bit too much fun my freshman year, and so pivoted over to just regular business administration.
It's engineering. You got to be focused. You got to be disciplined. This is for post-college.
Lots of math, right.
No, it's good. That's fascinating. I wouldn't have pegged you for an engineering like mindset, but I guess you are analytical enough. Similar to me, man. I don't mind doing spreadsheets. I just don't want to be doing it all day, every single day. Right?
Absolutely. If there's a purpose behind it, then it's fun.
I actually kind of like. I like math. I did a bunch of math stuff and was in competitions even in high school and didn't mind it, but like I'm not the overly analytical engineering type, but I'm kind of like in the middle, which is I would probably peg you for somewhere in there too.
Flexing over there is a unnatural flex, but I realize what you can gain from doing that, and the necessity of being able to do that,
for sure,
especially in business and outside of business.
Yeah, it's a great skill set to have.
Kids' homework.
Yeah, exactly. So what did it look like after college? So you go through school, and you're like, hey, I can either go start my own business and something else, or I can potentially take over the family business.
Sure.
How did that transition happen? How did the conversations happen with your dad?
It wasn't a type of conversation that was like, hey, Alex, you have this opportunity. If you come in, here's a pathway for you to move forward. It was very much nonchalant and totally informal in regards to, hey, you got to have a job, buddy. Like, you just got out of college. You made this happen. You're here. You need to continue moving forward in your life. There's opportunity at the company, but you're going to work and you're going to go through, and do whatever needs to be done. So I opted actually not to go into the company and opted to go after, at that point in time, kind of chasing a little bit of money, which were some of the other jobs that I mentioned. So I did that for a couple of years.
But I think that's really good because and obviously you had a lot of different jobs, in high school and college, but I think it's also good for something to compare it to, right? Like, I usually don't hire people straight out of college,
right? Because
they don't know how good they've got it working for. I want them to compare it to some other shithole job with some shithole manager and some shithole location with shitty hours and everything else that sucks, right? And then have that as the expectation, and then they come over here, and then work with us, and we have a ton of fun, and we have a great community, and we have a great just core values and a little bit of flexibility and schedule and all that stuff, and then they appreciate it more, So I think that's good.
I agree 1,000%, and that I think that's an important thing to note is that there's two ways to address that, if you will. When you have an open role where you need somebody like that, that's where you would typically go, right? So you would lean into that. We've had instances in HR, for example, like we do things different than everybody. It's a small company, you wear a lot of different hats and kind of push different ways. So we've hired, dedicated folks who are very good at going out and literally hiring people. We've hired folks who are really good at the administrative side. We've hired folks that are really good at internal policy and procedure. And as part of the evolution and journey of the company, but just recognizing where those opportunities lie, I think was it was a big thing for us. And we have had younger people when we had those needs. Whereas like, hey, I want somebody fresh. I have the SOPs built out. I have this. I don't want them corrupted by.
Yeah, and at the same time, right? They can be jaded by the workforce if they go somewhere else.
Exactly.
Versus, you know, that freshness and the excitement. You know, and you can test it out. You can see, because you're a seasonal business, right? Like you can have kids come and work for you in the summertime and put out the chairs and clean up stuff and blah blah blah. And you can see what their work ethic is. You can see how responsible they are, how accountable they are, and then you can let that roll into an actual formal job offer once they get out. So 100%. I could see that being a good setup. So you come into the company, you're working for the company, and after you chase a couple other opportunities, chasing some other money, you decide to come back. Why?
I recognized that there was opportunity, and manual labor, while fun and somewhat stimulating at that point in time, was not going to make it for the rest of the time. Just looking around, that was 2006, 7, 8. So there was a lot of things happening in the real estate world, and saw friends moving forward at a rapid pace, and I was just kind of steady. So I was like, okay, time to switch gears. I need to rethink where I am, recalibrate mindset here. Got back into the company, got my real estate license, started working in our long-term division. So these are the annual leases, things of that nature. Came in, worked with the department leader, and we grew that business from 74 units to like 230 units, 6 regimes over the course of like 2.5 years. And that was an awesome adventure and journey. And spent 5 years in that particular division, getting it to that point in time. Almost every role within the company, I've spent a decent amount of time. Not necessarily by choice, but it just kind of happened that way, which I think has lent itself to help me who I am, no doubt about it, as a manager.
And I think that's key. And I was going to ask, like, do you think the team and your staff respects you more because you've actually done each of those different things?
I would say yes. I don't know that everybody knows everything that I've done per se. But I think how I go about things and how I'm able to relate to whatever it is, whatever challenge, and like know the intimate details of the various situations, that when we're in a challenging situation or in a gray area, is very apparent that we've been through this or we've done this, or there's a great deal of confidence in, hey, this is the path forward. Or these are the 2 or 3
Everything's
options.
very logical about the way that you go about it because you've been down that road. So now they can't pull wool over your eyes and try to, get away with something. You're like, no, hey, here's the way to go. And then I think by sharing that experience or sharing those insights, then it does generate more respect and confidence and leadership by you showing that you've been down that road and you've done those things. And I've done the same thing with the property management side, right? Like when I first got started, I was a one-man band. I'm finding the deals, I'm underwriting the deals, I'm meeting with the contractors, I'm leasing the units, I'm collecting rent, I'm showing up, with heaters when it freezes up in Cleveland, Ohio, and all this other stuff.
Happens out there a lot, huh?
Oh man, a little too often. And it only happens at nighttime and on the weekends. So it's like stores are closed, right? You're in the middle of hanging out.
I was out here on Christmas handing out heaters this year because it was cold. It was ridiculous. So
I had some pipe sprays at my house. But yeah, man, I think it's a fascinating journey to see how that goes. What does it look like from the seasonality of your business? And you guys are heavy, obviously, on vacation rentals. Did you always have the long-term rentals also? Is that something you guys added later for steadiness of cash flow, or just kind of by hey, do you guys do property management? Do you guys do management on this side too? And how did all that stuff? Because you guys have a lot of different businesses that you've now expanded into. So you have the short-term rentals, you have the long-term rentals, you have all the different vendor businesses too that you guys have kind of brought in-house.
Absolutely.
And tell me about that transition of looking at your profit and loss statement and saying, hey, I'm spending this much money on linens, or this much money on cleaning services, or this much money on whatever, and you're like, what happens if we brought this in-house and handle it that way? I think that's a really unique part of your business.
So it was very much kind of an evolution, and actually I think the analysis of it was more about control and quality than it was financial related. We knew that we could make the financials make sense, always respectful of the financials and run the numbers every time you do everything. But as we saw opportunities for control, we took them. The long-term stuff was a strategic maneuver in regards to we are being seasonal. Cash flow is a make or break deal for our business. We have a handful of months that are good to great, and then the rest of the months we're basically operating in a negative place. The long term allowed us to even out some of that cash flow and just pay bills all the way around and count on that kind of income at those points in time. That business, not seasonal, but subject to seasons, if you will, in regards to what's going on in the economy and things of that nature. So that one also goes up and down. But that was the steady eddy and kind of our rudder, if you will, for the balance of the business. As we grew, at one point in time, we were probably about 500 units. We saw opportunities for the housekeeping, the linens, the having contract cleaners versus in-house cleaners versus owners having cleaners and things of that nature. So it was an evolution of, hey, we need control, checks and balances.
Less headaches, and
Absolutely.
and just control quality, right?
Yeah, and it's been, that in itself has also been a journey in that, not 5 years ago, we were heavy on internal housekeepers that actually work directly for us. And now it's migrated more into contract cleaners. If we could wave a magic wand, we'd mitigate some risk by having a third potentially in-house housekeepers, a third contract cleaners, and maybe a third allowing owners to have their own cleaners. This day and age is extremely challenging in the hospitality world, just in Charleston in general. I don't think we're unique in that aspect, but we are subject to what happens there in that regard.
I want to talk about the labor force and lean into that and kind of how that has changed and how that has shifted over the past few years, because I think every industry has been adversely affected, especially for those kind of the general or entry labor type of jobs.
Yep.
And obviously we've seen it on the maintenance side of things and property management and all these other things, and wages have grown, but quality has not. Actually, it's probably gotten worse. And how has that affected you guys across the board?
I've tried to take it apart and analyze where our actual needs are in consideration of it, because it is extremely challenging. And one of my peer groups that I've worked with, we had a lot of conversations about it. I've talked with you. We use the predictive index to study people a little bit better, just have a better understanding of how people naturally operate, how we operate.
What's yours, by the way? Do you know?
It is a, oh geez.
You captain?
Nope, it is, I'll have to come back to you on that.
All right.
It was a Maverick when I did it, when we went to Chicago, but before that
okay.
it was a, it starts with the C. I'll come back to it.
Yeah. So the Maverick and the captain are pretty much the same thing, except the captain's a little bit more analytical.
Right.
Like Caleb Pearson is a Maverick, and he's just shooting from the hip all the time. Like you can see
that
that
from a mile away, right?
He's like,
yep.
And I would expect you to be more captain, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, and so we use that information to better understand ourselves, but also how are we showing up and portraying ourselves when we're doing interviews, when we're out there in the community, when we're advertising. That was a big part of it, and that we kept coming back to that, and that's always a challenge. How do you show up in the interviews? Are you at your best? What is the perception from the outside looking in of who you are? So that was a big step. Step number 2, we're talking about, in the past 3-4 years, money has always been a challenge. Like, a lot of people from the outside looking in don't understand entrepreneurs, small business, in that it's not always about the money. There are so many other factors that have to be taken into consideration. However, it often is about money. And you have to really understand what motivates people. And our business being seasonal, it's unique in that we need people. Our turn days are the weekends. I don't need people 7 days a week. I really only need them 2 days a week. So we developed a program where we did essentially time and a half pay for the 2 days a week that we need people.
That makes sense.
I can pay people that on the weekends. I don't need it for 7 days versus I'm competing against a resort down the street or these other guys on the street. And so we were able to leverage that.
And they can go work a full-time job if they want.
Absolutely.
And have this secondary income for their family by just working on the weekends. It doesn't impede on what their full-time opportunities are, what their full-time career is. And it gives anybody, really, you don't need somebody who just wants to be a cleaner full-time to come out and do that. It can be anybody looking for a second job.
Yep. And to that end, you really have to understand the motivations, and depending on what individual segment you're looking at, like our housekeepers are different from our inspector team, which is different from our maintenance technicians. So really trying to understand those group of people and truly where your business needs are. And how do you optimize that? And we were able to do that particular portion where we did, higher end weekend pay. It helped a little bit, but it certainly was not a silver bullet. Things are still extremely challenging. When I was over running housekeeping, it was not uncommon for, if we had 50 housekeepers scheduled, 7 of them would call out the morning of. And then you're scrambling, trying to figure out how to navigate and create, excessive resources to hit those challenges. Now it's more like 1 or 2.
Have we, I don't know, it's always probably more complex than that, but I know we've talked before of like, I don't know, could you bring in people from Columbia, South Carolina, or other or Orangeburg, right, or Walterboro, right, where those types of jobs are not available, and you need to figure out somewhere to house them, and it can probably turn into something a little bit more complex. But everybody who's moving to Charleston, I saw a statistic today that like prices have increased and inflation has increased, or prices on real estate has increased by like 40% here.
Yep.
Over the past 3 years, but income growth has only increased by 3% on average.
Sounds about right.
So what does it tell you? It tells you that the people here are probably making their money somewhere else, right?
Yep. Agreed.
And I feel like there's an opportunity for some of those lower paid jobs that are in other towns. You can find somebody an hour away. If you could put them up for overnight, bring them in on Saturday morning, have them work all day Saturday, work all day Sunday, and then send them back or something. But I don't know, maybe that's too complex. It's hard because we're dealing with construction side of things too, and the maintenance side of things.
Yeah.
We're paying maintenance guys $20, $25 an hour to essentially change door locks and sweep units, right? You're like, this is an $8 to $10 an hour job, and all of a sudden it used to be.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a new normal?
I do. And just because that I can't see in the real world where anything's going backwards in that regard.
Yeah.
We might see some tightening up of it here in the next 12 months, and things might shift a little bit, but I don't think we're going to have that dramatic of a change. I think what you'll see is probably the cream, if you want to call it that, rise to the top in those individual segments. But I mean, even talking with all of our restaurant buddies, they're in the same kind of boat, and reallocating resources and trying how to, figuring out how they can get optimized to make it still go, knowing that they're that is a huge restriction in the business. So
you got that. Insurance is going through the roof. Interest rates are increasing, right? Like there's a lot of headwinds that we're facing, especially in real estate, and really all entrepreneurs are facing that. Our buddies in the restaurant industry, their insurance is going through the roof too, especially here in South Carolina, and it's a lot of headwinds, So what do you do in order to kind of look at those things and analyze and try to effectively improve upon and make sure that you're increasing income, decreasing expenses? Like, are you doing that? Are you looking at your profit and loss statement on a regular basis? Are you meeting with the team? Like, what do those conversations look like? Yeah,
I think any entrepreneur worth their salt is going to be analyzing that and be in touch with those variables. They should be on a almost weekly basis.
I hope so, right?
So we meet with our leadership team. We have discussions. We do run the company with open books, so that everybody has some financial literacy, especially in regards to their individual departments, but also what's happening across the departments. In short-term rentals, we're so many different spokes on the wheel. They all have to work together in order for that wheel to spin. So it's paramount that everybody's in touch with it. Always got to keep eye on the prize with that. We are super data heavy in regards to studying. The way that our business works for the most part is we're transacting in the future today, and then our expenses kind of follow. So we are very dynamic in our expenses. We have some fixed stuff, but for the most part, so we have some runway to understand where things are going and a little bit of time to act and react. The flip side of that is that you have to be very in touch and almost guesstimate where things are going to be right now for like 2024. So you have to take a hard stance on where you think things are going to be, and you have to act today in order to make that happen, and then everything else will follow suit. Yes, got to be on top of expenses and managing those very critically as we go into these next handful of months.
Yeah, I think that's really important from a metric standpoint, and knowing your numbers, knowing your KPIs, right? Knowing the data behind these things, and looking at it historically, and then moving forward and making quick decisions. One thing that I've messed up on over the past couple of years is not moving fast enough when things going sideways. Like I try to help with a management company. I try to train them and teach them and give them SOPs or work with certain people and give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to get better or improve their work ethic or their attitude or whatever. And it doesn't happen,
Right.
And then all it does is delay the inevitable. And I had an extra 3 months or 6 months of underperformance as opposed to just cutting the head off the snake early and ripping the Band-Aid off. Yeah, it's painful in the short term, but long term it's a much better outcome, and I've seen that
much easier said than done.
It very much so, right? Because
but that's the reality.
As the owner of a business, like I want to see people succeed. I want to see, I want everybody to.
Yeah.
But it's not happening, and people don't. They take the path of least resistance, right? Like water that it flows down river, and it's going to find whatever the easiest path is, and the easiest path is them not doing work and you not firing them. Then sometimes that happens.
Well, and we've talked about like the EOS system, the entrepreneurial operating system. Generally, that's how we've run the business. So we have weekly set meetings, we have KPIs, we have rocks, goals, all that fun stuff. But I think that's a healthy part of any and all businesses, or it should be, just so that you have a better understanding. It's like your dashboard, and you have those real live discussions. So you have somebody that's falling behind. They should know it, and everybody else should know it, and either they step up or they're going to have to step out. So that's a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, I've done that lots and lots of times, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's one of those, and we can psych ourselves out, right? Like I saw a study that interviewed a whole bunch of people. It was just general, I don't know, like anybody who came in and was at like walking through a park or something, and they wrote down in like green marker everything that was good that happened last year and everything that was bad that happened last year. And it was about 50-50, right? And then they wrote down and in red marker, it was like all the negative stuff, right, that happened. And so it was about 50-50 on that canvas. And then on this canvas over here, it was like, this is the year looking forward. And it was over 90% green marker, all positive, and only less than 10% was red marker. And so, people psych themselves out that things are going to be better than they actually are. And if you're not running that's all emotionally based, right? Is what it essentially came down to. And when you sit down and you look at the metrics and you sit down and you reflect based on KPIs and running it by the EOS system, you realize like you need to make decisions based on data and not based on emotions or drama.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I think it's interestingly enough in the real estate world, it is subject to a lot of trends. And when you're studying the data and you have a couple of years of experience, you can pick up on those trends and reasonably predict. May not be the exact same, but generally they're similar, and they have the same kind of cycles up and down and the duration of them. Us being super seasonal, cash flow is a huge deal for everything we do. We have to be. If we're not in tune with the books and what's happening every minute of every day, then we're just setting ourselves for disaster down the road. So we've almost had to adopt those policies and procedures and go through that type of process.
No, it's impressive. What does the next 12 to 24 months look like in your eyes? From let's talk macro economy. Let's talk local economy. Let's talk real estate. Or like macro economy, real estate, and then your business.
So macro, we talked about there's a business paper that we looked at. I think we're obviously facing some headwinds. By whatever name you want to call it, I think 2024 is going to be slightly more challenging than 2023. We keep hearing government entities giving different indications. I think they're working 6 to 12 months in the past kind of a deal, just because of how they're not quick.
Yeah,
in
I agree
any
with
regard.
That. I agree with that, man.
But that's my outlook for 2024. It will be interesting to see when interest rates move. I think that's going to be the trigger or the fulcrum for what happens, if then. Charleston generally, I think we are by and large insulated. I know we have a housing inventory shortage, so it will be interesting when interest rates go down, and they will, what the outcome, how fast the velocity is. But where I think everybody would agree that's going to be an upward inflection point. The question for me is what happens then? If we're talking, in 12 months, I think everybody would reasonably agree that interest rates are going to be down, but then what? So we're going to blow through inventory, everything's going to accelerate at a rapid pace, and then what? Are we going to reach a pinnacle and then it drops off again? So that's kind of where I'm looking at it is, yes, pay attention to 24, but 25 and 26, you need to be strategic in where you're feeling and sensing that stuff looks like. Charleston, a little bit different than everybody else. But those are things I'm paying attention to. Internally, what we're seeing this year, we'll still stay in the single digits in terms of where we were off of last year. So we're not quite off 10%. Let's call it 9% was probably where we're in the year, which is good, all things considered. Next year, we're already seeing a 15% reduction in everything across the board. It's very interesting.
For where you are at this point, last year, you had 15% more in bookings and reservations and everything else.
Correct. So pace or velocity of bookings. And what we do, we have so many different segmentations of inventory, large homes, condos, 3 and 4 bedroom homes. They all behave and act differently. So that's, an average, which is not a great way to look at things, but it gives you a sense of what's what. And then you go back and you compare it to 2019 trends, and it's more aligned. It's still not the same, but it's more aligned. It's more smoothed out like that. It is interesting to note that prices are still holding strong. They're coming down a little bit in regards to rent. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think we're going to see a tremendous collapsing of the volume of activity. Our shoulder seasons in the Charleston area have been strong. They were phenomenal, obviously, during the COVID years. But I think we'll start to see some of that contract. The 12 weeks of the summer, where we were at 100% occupancy the past 5 years, I don't think it would be ridiculous to see it at 75, 80%, depending on the inventory type. So,
and you're giving overall general picture for the entire portfolio. Are there certain properties in there that stay rented at a higher occupancy and maintain the rental rate more so than others?
Traditionally, I would say yes. 5 bedroom or larger homes traditionally have had very little impact due to economic headwinds.
Okay.
Those are the patriarchs of the family. At our price point, typically money's not the biggest concern. It's the dates and getting the families together and stuff like that. This year, 2023, we saw a massive difference in that type of inventory in the booking, which would have happened in 22. So whatever information or feeling or senses were out there in 22 translated into what we're seeing in 23. I expect the similar for 24. Interestingly enough, condos, we've seen their occupancy levels have increased. They can do 3 and 4 night stays and more set up for stuff like that.
Still oceanfront, you can do shorter visits, and it's
Correct.
just a little bit less price point.
Absolutely. And we see, we're starting to see the traveler demands for the untraditional stays, and that they're not looking necessarily for a Saturday or Sunday turn day. I think a lot of people are turned off by having to travel on those days just because it's so busy, especially with the Charleston airport, airlines, and the fiascos. And we're primarily a drive market. So we're seeing a lot more, maybe they check in on Sunday and they're out on Tuesday or Wednesday, or they're checking in on Tuesday and they're out on Friday. So
Can you charge a premium for that, or do you usually just kind of keep it where it is?
With the way that we have structured our pricing, it is very dynamic, and every day is priced differently, and every time you look at it, it's going to be priced differently. So if there is peaks in demand, if it's a holiday or a special event or things like that, we're going to see different price points across those.
So would you advise someone like me who owns property here on the island to allow less than 1 week rentals and like next summer during the peak season?
I think it depends on your inventory type. So with the inventory that you have, it's still going to be probably a traditional type stay.
Okay.
So they're probably going to want 7 days. In larger homes, it is a family typically that's coming in, or a multi-groups, so they have to collaborate and set dates and plan, versus a condo, let's call it 3 bedrooms or less, even homes 3 bedrooms or less, it's more last minute, and it's more like a household or a small group that can get together and just go. So I don't know that I'd set that up. That being said, outside of the hardcore summer months, that 12-week period, June to August, let's call it, you will see people who will book 4 or 5 night stays in those larger homes. So it just depends.
It's an interesting business, man. Like I think I used to, I don't know if I told you this, but I used to own a management company up in Cleveland, Ohio. We managed about 600 doors.
Yep.
I mean, nowhere near the rental rates, right, that you guys have down here. And it was earlier in the career, but it was out of necessity. It was the management companies weren't doing their job, right? And we had our own properties. We were selling turnkey homes and building the business that way. And in order for us to continue flipping the houses and inventory that we had, we needed to then take in-house essentially construction and property management. And but you have to run it like a separate business, And I think, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is they have a business? Like I'll give you an example. When I first got started, I wanted everything vertically integrated, right? And own everything. I want to own the brokerage, the investment fund, the construction, the property management, like all these different components of it, and have it all in-house and just make money and gobs of money everywhere. We laugh, right? Because every single one of those is its own business, right? And every single one of those you need essentially a COO, an integrator, to then run that business. You have to make sure it operates and it is profitable as its own business. At what point did it make sense for you to staff everything out and then started bringing things in-house, but now you're staffing things out again?
Yeah. I think it depends on the individual business. From the short-term property management, like we've done a couple of acquisition and mergers, and we see that delta at 28 to 30 properties. You start to go from it's not feasible for a single individual just to be able to cover everything. You have to start scaling at that point in time. I think the next one is right around 50. Then you get to 50 to 80, and then it gets infinitely more complicated from there. Scheduling, programs, accounting, all the fun pieces and parts of it. So it really depends on the business. Also depends on the geography as well. So we're on an island, so we're fairly confined, and let's call it a 6-mile stretch between the two islands and offices and things like that. But I always said, like, if I had a hotel or a 400-door complex, like I could do that with one hand tied behind my back.
I know, right?
Like that would be so easy.
The efficiencies of that, and that was the hard part of managing 600 doors that were single-family homes all around,
right?
An hour radius, and I guess an hour, 30 to 45-minute radius, and it was just difficult, right? Versus then, and every time we grew. And took on more doors, we started making money. We had to hire somebody else, and then it eats all the profit that we were making.
It's a net zero proposition, just more headaches.
I mean, the benefit is, you own an asset, you own all these contracts that have this residual value, that have enterprise value that you can eventually sell if you ever want to do, and that's what we ended up doing eventually. And then I just took those same SOPs and I brought it in-house, and I said, hey, we're just going to manage our own shit, 100 units, 200 units, 400 unit complexes, and we can do it with a fraction, right? And then create efficiencies that way. So.
I think property management is very challenging, to say the least, for 100 different reasons. And depending where you are and the resources that you have access to can make or break it. In some areas like Florida and Texas, housekeeping is not an issue, but maybe maintenance technicians are an issue, or mid-level managers are an issue. So it really just depends on where you are. For when you start to bring all this stuff in. And then, I think for all businesses, once you get going, you have to do everything. That's just the nature of it. Don't have to, but there is a journey that comes, and an education and wisdom that comes with doing that stuff. And then you start to see, there are actually other people that can do it better than I can, or at least at the same level, and I can focus my energy on something that I can, increase and go.
How have you, and we'll wrap with this, but how have you continuously kind of grown as an entrepreneur, grown as an individual mentally, and had these difficult conversations I remember feeling like I was alone on an island. I eventually found like mastermind groups and stuff like that. Have you plugged into things like that over the years? Like how have you been able to continue to grow and have high level conversations with other people? Where do you find those individuals, and how have you been able to continuously, like when you have a difficult thing happen in business, who do you go talk to, and what does that look like?
The way that I would describe that is it's probably best described as like the compounding effect. Little decisions every day that you make over a series of time impact and drive the results that happen in 2, 5, 10 years. I firmly believe in that. And I think everybody has to just, what is one thing that I'm going to do different or better today? Am I going to read a book? Am I doing this? Am I going to go work out? Whatever it is. So starting with that stuff, it's just the little things that make it. It's not one day you wake up and all of a sudden stuff's happened. Like it just doesn't work like that.
It's because all those little things that you didn't do compounded over time, and then it becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. And it seems like it all happened, but no, this was many, many, many bad decisions, small bad decisions, incrementally in a row that have eventually snowballed and turned into that. Or on the opposite side of the coin, right? The good decisions, and that then compound, and then you seem like you're an overnight success.
Absolutely. And then you have to be in the right room with the right people. The education that you get grow leaps and bounds. It's been a handful of years, but I joined a group called Vistage and was involved with them for a long time. A lot of different entrepreneurs across various business segments, but just hearing where they are, talking about their sleep hygiene and waking up in the morning and just what they did every day. It was like, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I need to start doing those things.
No wonder I'm always tired. No wonder, right?
And like just that stuff, it's not just business, it's life.
I agree.
And you have to it's a whole piece of the pie. You got to fully understand it, and you really got to fully take it all in and analyze and look for opportunities. Just little teeny baby steps. Just move it one. I am often happy but never satisfied, which is a blessing and a curse. But I really do push with my team, with myself, with everybody around me, is just one little thing. What can we do different today? What can we learn? What happened? What happened yesterday? What do we want to do different today? I have stuff in my mind that I want to change, every single day. It's just one little thing. And you just do that over time, and all of a sudden you look back and it's like, holy smokes, a lot's happened, a lot's changed.
Little corrections over time, keep you on track, keep you on pace in order to hit the final destination, man. So
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, dude, thank you so much. This has been super insightful. Always fun hanging out with you.
Love
and
it.
Excited to be back in Charleston and keep the workouts going, man. I'm coming for you.
Gosh, I'll believe it when I see it.
Hey, hopefully you guys got some great takeaways. If you're not connected with Alex already, definitely connect with them. If you're ever coming down to Charleston and you want to stay on the islands, definitely hit up Island Realty. These guys do a phenomenal job and have some of the best properties in Charleston that they represent and that they manage. So phenomenal people. Alex is a great guy. I'll share their contact information in the show notes here. And if you would, share your best takeaways in the comment section below. I love seeing that. If you have any questions for me, questions for Alex, we'll either create some content or reply to those questions to make sure that you get the answers that you're looking for. So appreciate you being here. Share, subscribe to the Legacy Wealth YouTube channel. Appreciate you, and I'll see you next week on Spilling the Beans.